Friends, the President of Ukraine has officially recorded and issued a very important address. And this is truly the first instance I've witnessed where he hasn't particularly chosen his words carefully. In a 10-minute video, Volodymyr Zelensky earnestly implores Ukrainians and quite clearly politicians to bring an end to the current bickering. I must reiterate this crucial point, to put a definitive stop to this continuous bickering, which is quite evident. And this particular bickering is directly and undeniably tied to Mindycha-gate, a situation clearly unfolding. And this bickering is clearly also connected to what is currently unfolding on the front line for us. Furthermore, this internal conflict is also inextricably linked to those specific points of the peace plan that initially emerged in various publications and subsequently proliferated rapidly through numerous Telegram channels. And it appears this is no mere jest, but rather a genuinely significant issue being deliberated today between the United States and the Russian Federation, a proposition Ukraine is expected to swiftly approve and execute. And just prior, friends, Volodymyr Zelensky gathered the Servant of the People faction. Not the Servant of the People party, but indeed the faction, because, for example, Bezula was there, who votes with the faction but is not a member of the Servant of the People party, and I think she's not even in the faction. However, she is allowed to be present and she makes no attempt to conceal it. And so, quite clearly, one situation builds upon another, and as a direct result, we receive this address to the Ukrainian people, which is connected with making difficult decisions. I must quote one particular statement here. Currently, Volodymyr Zelensky states, "We are in one of the most crucial periods of our history. Right now, Ukraine may be facing a very difficult choice. Either a loss of dignity, and President Zelensky offers no clarification on what he intends by this, or the potential risk of forfeiting a crucial ally. This is clearly about Washington, the United States of America. Alternatively, there are the challenging 28 points. This concerns the peace plan. Or an extremely hard winter. This is about the state of Ukraine's energy sector, which, not least, is in this condition obviously because of what the anti-corruption bodies are revealing. The hardest winter and all the ensuing risks. And what exactly are these further risks? Again, no clarification. A life without freedom, dignity, justice. And that we should trust the one who has already attacked twice. They will be waiting for our answer. And what comes next? I genuinely can't grasp this. Is this perhaps a crisis communication drafted by someone following yesterday's assembly with the servants, aiming to convey, let's put aside the Mindycha-gate and concentrate instead on the fact that we're being coerced into capitulation? If that's the case, then this is indeed a very distasteful game played by the PR specialists of the Office of the President. Because these two separate tracks, in my opinion, have first and foremost become intertwined. I think this whole thing is a coincidence. I genuinely believe it's a coincidence that it's not some kind of rebellion or conspiracy against Zelensky, Yermak, or anyone else, right? Or against Yulia Sviridenko. I think it's a coincidence. And I think the track of the fight against corruption and the track of peace negotiations, these are two distinct stories that simply exist side by side. They are indeed interconnected, yet they exist side by side. There's no need to pretend that we must ignore one in order to achieve the other, or vice versa. Therefore, true unification should only occur when someone thinks it's necessary. The country is already united, it seems to me, so the message of this current address is, of course, not sufficiently clear. I want to emphasize this again. If this is solely an attempt to divert attention from the Mindycha-gate scandal, then this story is truly not a very honorable one. In the first half of the day, you can look at the news feeds and see what they were focused on. This is because Volodymyr Zelensky communicated unequivocally to the faction that there would be no dismissal of his chief of staff, Andriy Borisovich Yermak. And in my opinion, a rather anticipated and logical response was given. Let us now delve into the words of President Volodymyr Zelensky, as relayed by some deputies present there, concerning the fact that it is indeed the sole prerogative of the head of state to appoint the leadership of his own office. I wholeheartedly concur with that assertion. It's a precisely clear legal response that should, in essence, put an end to the debate regarding who possesses the authority and the means to dismiss Yermak, should anyone deem such an action imperative. However, a separate consideration is that this entire narrative involving concerning Andrei Borisovich, this issue is being heavily promoted, even by Bezula herself, who attends these sessions despite not being a faction member. In all honesty, I believe it holds very little in terms of promising future opportunities. And so, Bezula states that this evening, these are insider details from yesterday's meeting. She directly questioned the president regarding Yermak, asking when he would be dismissed and what our next step should be. Mindych. The word Mindych was uttered once in the meeting, I said. The front line, specifically Siersky and Sidorenko's southern breakthrough. The veto on the law for officials skipping the Verkhovna Rada. What on earth is happening? Meeting outcome? Details are confidential. The session was closed. I honor the agreements. My overall impression is negative. Zelensky is indeed in an information bubble. I've chosen my side, the people. Is the president with them? We'll see. Concurrently, immense external pressure is on Ukraine and Zelensky concerning capitulation. So yes, indeed, everything has accumulated, and all of it is clearly reflected in this very address by Volodymyr Zelensky today. Please watch it and give your assessment. This is very important today as well. So, what exactly is Zhelezniak writing regarding the faction itself? He wasn't actually present at the meeting, but he clearly possesses some insider information. Regarding the risk of coalition collapse, the president's message was something like this. If the coalition falls apart, we'll have to go to elections, and you're unpopular, meaning the servants. So it's better to unite and come to some agreement among yourselves. In fact, Volodymyr Zelensky repeats this very point today in his address to the Ukrainian people about the difficult decisions that need to be made and the pressure that's coming next week. But, well, and regroup, because you are unpopular. If you are unpopular, then friends, what did you do to earn this unpopularity? And how will you be able to come together? And it's probable, quite probable, that these ongoing rumors, already being spread by MP Honcharенko, yes, who is talking about the existence of a so-called rebellion within the Servant of the People faction, which is still ongoing. These are not baseless claims. Poturayev's recent post concerning a coalition of unity, national salvation, or any other description indicates that certain members of the Servant of the People faction, even after meeting with and hearing from the president, are not abandoning this concept. And among them could be Poturayev, Arakamia, and even Hetmantsev. They're not giving up on the idea that, having accumulated significant political influence, leverage, and the like, they'll ultimately exit the Servant of the People faction and form a coalition with the parliamentary opposition. Therefore, the rebellion persists. It has simply transitioned into a more subdued, silent model. Most people anticipate that next week President Zelensky will make significant personnel decisions and restructure his team. However, if that doesn't come to pass, they will swiftly launch a counterattack. The office of the president has decided to use a classic method. For the budget vote, by the way, they want to gather votes with arguments like, the country has to pay salaries and live. Moreover, they intend to reassess several budgetary allocations and enhance them for pertinent groups. And then they plan to smoothly roll into the new year, hoping it will all blow over. That's what he writes. Well, that's the opinion of Ahem Honcharенko. And then there's this other perspective, from a source that I wouldn't precisely describe as authoritative or highly credible. Politika Strani, right? Well, yeah, a totally disgraced outlet. Yet, they maintain, and just today, as I was looking through things, I read that they engaged in a conversation with one of the individuals, sources within the Servant of the People faction. This individual was also present at yesterday's closed-door presidential meeting, specifically held with the Servant of the People faction. Yermak was present at the meeting. And this particular source asserts, pay close attention to this, that the present situation where Volodymyr Zelensky has either delayed or dismissed the suggestions and counsel to remove Andrei Borisovich and substitute him with someone else does not in fact signify a triumph for Andrei Borisovich. But just as an interesting thought, consider this. Yermak's remaining resources are now solely dependent on the president. Prime Minister Sviridенko has switched to a mode of cooperation with parliament. She was the quickest to see which way the wind was blowing and hopes to survive. The Prime Minister consults with Yermak, then calls Stefanchuk, inquiring if it will pass through the Rada. Naturally, if the President contacts her, she'll comply with his wishes. What he conveys to her, but he certainly won't be calling her every day. So, the economy is being taken from the office of the President. Stefanchuk remembered he's the state's second highest official, so they shouldn't have plotted against him. They actively thwarted his reforms, obstructing even minor initiatives, such as the legislation regarding time calculation in Ukraine. According to the source, Yermak has alienated everyone over 4 years of the Great War, and now the critical question is, why should we allow this one individual to negatively impact our lives? This source also noted Yermak's reduced sway over law enforcement agencies. For example, according to his data, Bankova demanded that the SVU open a criminal case against Arakemia. However, Malyuk tabled the question, and the Rada will not permit Malyuk's replacement. So that is the current state of affairs, simply because. It could be true. That's the situation. Now, regarding Yulia Sviridенko and this whole scenario that Politika Strani is writing about. Well, let them write, but they're using a source. So that source said something. Thus, the situation regarding Yulia Sviridенko, now conversing with Stefanchuk and so forth, is being agitated. And Bezula states that the cabinet's resignation, which European Solidarity and Batkivshchina advocate for, with a portion of the Servant of the People faction also supporting it, correct? Mariana Bezula believes this is Yermak's attempt to retain his post, partly via agreements in the Verkhovna Rada. First off, the president's office head must step down and so forth. It's the same old tune, let's start from the top again, but what's the fundamental essence here? I haven't encountered any speakers from Batkivshchina who are, in all honesty, utterly antagonistic toward the Servant of the People faction, have I? From European Solidarity, there are also demands for Yermak's resignation. That's simply not there. Why? Because institutionally, it holds no significance. It has absolutely no political significance, institutionally. So what does matter institutionally? What exactly is important? The formation of a new coalition is significant. If the Servant of the People faction wishes to establish this coalition, it is certainly achievable, isn't it? A new coalition that would grant every political faction forming it, including some part of the servants, be it large or small, I'm not sure, like those with Poturayev and Arakemia, and others, the opportunity to bring their own people into this cabinet of ministers, this government of unity, resilience, anti-crisis, whatever type of government it may be, right? To get those individuals in, and consequently, to take on political responsibility for those decisions that, at this moment, seem to differ from what the office of the president proposes, and in doing so, to form the government in the way it is currently being assembled. Procedurally, of course, it's correct, but we all understand that this is a vertical structure that is effectively in one person's hands today. That's truly what matters here. And as for what Andrei Borisovich has to do with all this, I sincerely cannot comprehend it at all. I don't really get Zhelezniak either. Why are you so fixated on Andrei Borisovich? One could imagine that if he were to be relieved of his current position, a role that is, to be quite frank, purely administrative. In terms of its function, I'm not talking about influence, let's say. Let's not get into conspiracy theories and so on. His position as head of the office of the president, that he wouldn't have access to talk to Volodymyr Zelensky? What exactly are you discussing? And a government led by a political figure. Petro Poroshenko, by the way, has recently become quite active, but I genuinely think that's just a complete fantasy. Petro Poroshenko will not be the prime minister. At best, maybe they'll manage to make some kind of trade, reach an agreement based on some promises, and maybe, just maybe, European Solidarity could get involved in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. That's a possibility, perhaps. But, well, that's a fantasy. To finish my thought, a prime minister as a prominent political figure. I believe this is the objective for that faction within the servants currently engaged in rebellion. And indeed, the objective is quite obvious for the opposition political forces currently in parliament, who, for the past 6 years, have been denied the opportunity to officially represent themselves, their voice, and their interests at the political level, at the government level, and at the executive power level. That's all there is to it. So there you have it. That's whole layout.